Alright, so the steel we need for this sword isn't in yet. It'll be in this Thursday, it should be at least. And it is currently Monday, so it won't be too terribly long now for me, and for you, it should be just in a very nice clip to come up. Anyways, I got a bit bored, and I wanted to discuss a couple things about this sword. Oh, sorry, coffee. Alright, so first off, I suppose we'll discuss the significance of this sword. So, if my research is to be accurate, boy, 1 second, please. There we go. Alright, so if my various internet searches are to be of any clout, any significance or importance, then I believe that this will actually be the first hand-forged modern design master sword to exist on YouTube. Now, I'm not saying it's the only modern design master sword to have been made, and by modern design I mean the design that's been used from Ocarina of Time onwards into the present. There have been other master swords made, however, the only one that I've found that has been fully forged has been from Man-at-Arms, so I'll just really quickly go over a brief chronology of the master swords that you can find on YouTube, or on the internet in general. So, the first one that I can find came quite a while back from the original Man-at-Arms, and they made a modern design master sword, I believe, the design from Ocarina of Time. So, that turned out very nice, it looked very good. However, theirs was pretty much entirely stock removal from a piece of 5160 steel. It turned out very nice, but it wasn't forging, it was stock removal, and nearly anyone can do that. The next one to come in terms of chronology was from Man-at-Arms Reforged. Matt went and made a master sword to accompany the Hylian shield that they had made in that episode. However, while it was fully forged, the one that Matt made was only was the original design master sword, not the current long version, the long sword or hand and a half sword design. It was the original single-handed short sword, pretty much. Then came along the next one, which was from Michael Cthulhu, but again, that was only stock removal. It turned out very good, looks very nice, but stock removal, not a piece of forging done on that. And the last one, to my knowledge, is from Farlight Forge, and he did his one was forged, but it was not a conventional master sword in the sense of our modern designs. It was a more apocalyptically inspired one. It looks very good, but it is not an actual master sword in the sense of blue guard and all that proper look. So, to my knowledge at least, this will be the first to exist on the internet of a fully hand-forged modern design master sword. Next up is the terminology. I've seen it referred to before as an arming sword, but in my opinion, it looks more along the lines of a long sword, or at least a hand and a half sword, because I have right here. Oh, I almost spilled my coffee. The blank that I was working on. This is to full dimension as far as length goes, but right there it is not wide enough, because right where the engraving of the Triforce is, it gets a bit wider. So the whole blade is the proper width, but right here it needs to be about 3 inches and not 2.5 inches. And you have the ricasso area. But so if you look at this, this is a very large sword, and I'm about 6 feet from my camera, and I can poke it from here. So it is definitely not an arming sword, which is something you can wield more single-handedly. I can, but only if I use the power of leverage. And even that's a bit shaky. If I get it closer, you can see it shaking. So I would definitely call it more of a long sword or hand and a half sword, and not so much an arming sword. So after that length then comes in, I suppose, the actual size of the sword itself. Technically speaking, this sword is way, way too big for somebody Link's size to wield. Now, I approximate Link as being about 5'4", which is how I got my dimensions. To put it in perspective, 5'4" is yay high. If I stand up back here, you can see that is only about up to my chin. So, yeah, and then the sword itself is 52 inches. This sword right here is even a bit big for me to use as a long sword. I could use it, but it should be technically a bit smaller for somebody my size to wield, and I am considerably taller than somebody Link's size, so it is exceedingly too large for Link to wield effectively. But then again, superhuman strength and the power of Japanese protagonists. So yes, technically too large a sword, but I love the proportions of it. It is very unique design. Then when it comes to material, inevitably, if people actually end up watching this video, then there will be somebody in the comments thinking or writing out, why are you using steel and not iron? Well, it's quite simply because iron sucks for making blades. I know that like the classic thing is a sword made of iron, but however, that kind of notion comes mainly from sources such as Minecraft or other games in which you use iron. When all is said and done, iron blades are horrible. The material iron has very little to no carbon in it at all, meaning it cannot harden, which then means it cannot take an edge or hold an edge well. In order from lowest carbon to highest carbon, in iron that you have elemental iron, which is nothing but iron, so there's no carbon in there at all and will not harden. Next you have wrought iron, which has, I believe, around 0.01% carbon, so too little carbon to even harden. And at the far end of the spectrum, you have cast iron, which starts at, I believe, about 2.5% carbon, which is way, way too hard. The highest carbon content you usually get in blade steels is 1%, so exceedingly too far. If you try to heat treat cast iron, no matter how gentle of a quench you use, it will almost invariably shatter upon quench, so that cannot be used. Wrought iron can be used as a cladding for San Mai blades because it will not suffer any damage in a water quench or oil quench. However, if you're going to make a blade out of iron, it needs to have iron claddings with a high carbon bit to make the cutting edge out of. However, here in Texas, it is hard to come across wrought iron, and when you do, it is expensive. And as such, I will not be using the San Mai construction to make the Master Sword. In addition to that, wrought iron, whenever you etch it, has a more kind of wood grain pattern, and the Master Sword is quite plainly and clear to see a monosteel blank. It is simply one kind of steel the whole way through with no sign of even a hamon or anything, which is a shame. I would have liked to do a hamon, which is a Japanese bladesmithing technique wherein the spine or flats of a blade are left very soft, so they have a bit more give to them, while the edge is still very hard, so it can cut through things very easily. So yes, I'll be using steel, 1075 steel, simply because iron is a terrible blade steel. It's such a bad steel that the joke gets old very fast. One could say it gets very dull very fast. Alright, and with the steel that I chose 1075 because it is a good blade steel for swords and is very easily accessible. I would have liked to use something more along the lines of Hitachi Blue, which is the Japanese steel it's from Japan, and it is made by a Japanese company. However, there's the two problems with it. First off, I cannot find Hitachi Blue in the appropriate length for this. I can only find it in about 2 foot lengths, and I need at least a 4 foot length to get started with this. And second off, after forging and etching, then it will be very clear that there are 3 distinct layers in it, and not all one continuous solid piece of steel, so that will not do, unfortunately. Oh, that's it. So, with the sword itself, or I should say with the engraving, right there. You can probably see that, but I can't tell on the viewfinders. Right there with the engraving. And I have seen it. Oh, it really went down. I have seen it done on Master Swords 2 main ways so far. One way is with electrochemical etching. That is how they did it on Man-at-Arms, and that is how they did it. That is how Michael Cthulhu did his as well. And the other way I've seen it done is by carving it in with a Dremel, which is how Faraway Forge did his. However, I'm very interested to try my hand at classical engraving because I have not seen the Triforce symbol actually engraved in with hand chisels and all that, so I may give that a try. I wouldn't do my first tests on the actual piece itself, of course. That could ruin it and end up making it take way longer to get new steel in if I ruin the piece. So there would be practice done beforehand. But yes, I would like to try at least try my hand at making this with actual hand engraving. The blade is a very interesting shape. You don't very often see swords with ricassos, that being this unsharpened area. You don't often see them with blades with swords with ricassos that are that much thinner than the rest of the blade. But I have to say, it's a very unique design, and I'm quite fond of it. And then comes the issue of the fittings, that being the guard and the pommel. So there are two ways that you can do this. One way is that you can cast them out of like bronze or brass or aluminum, or you can simply shape them out of steel. Now, I will not make a decision on what I will make the fittings out of until I have the blade forged and ground and all that, because excuse me, coffee burps. I want my point of balance for the sword to be about here-ish, a bit down from the engraving. So I want it to be around this area. So, if the point of balance is too far forward along the blade, then I'll make the pieces out of heavier things, i.e. steel or brass or bronze. However, if it is around the right area, then I'll make them out of aluminum, or perhaps I'll make one piece out of aluminum and one piece out of steel or bronze, i.e. the guard out of steel and the guard out of I said guard? I meant pommel right there. Pommel out of steel and guard out of aluminum, so as to give it a good balance in the hand. However, that will have to wait until the forging is all done. Yes, this sword is definitely not an easy one to use because there is no taper to it in the slightest. You can see it is the same width the whole way down. The only variation would be the ricasso, which is only 2 inches wide, and what I'm calling the engraving plate, which is about 3 inches wide. From there, after the engraving plate, it is all 2.5 inches until the tip. So, and there's no distal taper to it either. It remains the same thickness the whole way down, and I'm making mine out of 1/4 inch steel. So, like I said, you can wield it one-handed. Ow, there are a considerable amount of burrs on the tang from grinding, so I'm not going to swing it, because the last time I did that I cut all of my fingers. So you can wield it one-handed, but it is definitely difficult, and you need to use leverage with your arm right there, like so. It is much easier to wield two-handed, which is why I consider this blade to be a two-handed sword, i.e. a long sword or a hand-and-a-half sword. So, I believe that is really all about the logistics then. So, for you guys, it will be the very next clip to pop up. And for me, it will be in about 3 or 4 days. But the next time you see me, I will be in the shop and we'll begin working on the sword at long last. So, just stay tuned in until then. It's me from a couple of days later. So, in fact, it's the day after I did the first round of forging on the sword itself, so kind of put things into perspective a bit. So, I did a bit more research over the weekend and figured out that there actually have been some master swords forged on the internet that are modern design, at least claimed. One claimed to be forged, but it does not specify the steel it is made of. However, it does the selling point does include a disclaimer that it should not be used, as it could cause damage to the blade. So it makes me think that it could be a slightly inferior steel. Another one that I found, which does not claim to be forged, but is a modern design anyway. It says it's made of 1045 steel, which is a steel I would not personally use for anything smaller than a greatsword. So that's a thing right there. But then it turns out that Ilya Alexeyev from Man at Arms Reforged and over on That Works Now actually forged one back around Christmas time, although it was a mini version. I don't know how large it was, but it was a small version with a blade made of 80 CRV2 and really nice looking fittings. So since it was made by him, by Ilya Alexeyev, it's definitely better than what we're going to be able to do here. Firstly, because he's a professional, and we're a bunch of just a bunch of kids with beating things with hammers. But yeah, ours will be bigger than the one he made. But regardless, so as Sinway said earlier, this will not be the first forged modern design master sword on the internet, but it'll definitely be pretty good regardless. If somehow any of the people who've made these previously forged modern design master swords end up watching this, I'm sorry, don't take offense. So yeah, that's all. This quick little thingy. I'm just waiting for it to cool down some so I can work on the sword again. So until next time.